to the last session. I think this is actually the most interesting session, and it really builds on all of the information that you had for the last 5 sessions. So thank you for coming. Tonight, we are going to be doing the city budget. And you guys are going to do your own city budgets at your tables. And I will just tell you right now, we've got, I think maybe with this table, I'll have you guys split up and add on to one of the tables. It only has 4 people, so keep that in mind. Right now, we're going to have a presentation first from the mayor's office. We have Dale Bickle and Jessica Miller, and I'll just let you guys introduce yourselves a little bit, what your job is, what you do, and then they are going to do a presentation on the city budget to give you more of a foundation for the exercise that you're going to do. Go ahead.
I'm going to start us off. I'm Dale Bickle. I am the city's Chief Administrative Officer. And that it's kind of a strange title. What I think that really means when I talk to people about what I do is I'm the chief of staff for the mayor. I think you met with Mayor Davis early on in the program, and we have a strong mayor form of government. Mayor Davis is the chief executive of the city, and I'm the chief of staff. So my role is I oversee all of the departments of the city and work on the mayor's agenda and working with departments. My background is finance. I'm a CPA by training. I started in local government as the chief financial officer of Missoula County. And then I was at Missoula County for 14 years, and I moved across the street to become the chief administrative officer in Missoula. And I've been in Missoula at the City of Missoula for about 10 years now. Jessica Miller is our website and digital engagement manager. What her role is she is excellent at taking our complex financial information and putting it in the form of graphs and charts and narratives that our residents can understand. So we're going to try to do some of that today, and we're going to share this presentation. And bear with me a little bit. I have not had much time to look at this, so though I know the content pretty well, so bear with us. So I'm just going to dive right in. Jessica, did you want to say? So first, in the context of Montana tax system, and you've heard Missoula talk about how our tax systems work, and it's a lot different than the rest of the country. And this is what this chart shows. The pie chart on the left up there shows the average of how governments are funded across the country, and local governments in particular. In the average is 72% of local government is funded by property taxes. In Montana, we are relying on 96.5% of revenues are support governments in Montana. The other thing that's happening is that our taxes, not only we have a concentration of property taxes that we're relying on, that 96%, our tax base is shifting as well. And what this shows is that there's a significant shift happening between the classes of properties: commercial, residential, business property taxes, centrally assessed, which are large corporations that work between counties within the state of Montana. And what this does in a fairly short period of time shows that this is 1999 to 2023. You can see the dates on the right there. But in that period of time, the tax base this is Missoula, the city of Missoula in particular, is residential was 42%, and then just a little over 20 years later, it's 65%. And but that translates to residential property tax increases, is that shift, because of that it's not only just new funding for governments in our in budget increases, but it's actually that shift of dollars away from these other classes of property. The other thing is that the regressivity of our property tax system, and there's the ideas of progressive tax systems, like an income tax system that is really based solely on income is progressive because it really is focus on the ability to pay. You get down to sales taxes, which are more regressive because it's not so much based on the ability to pay. In Montana, what this chart shows is that it is the most regressive tax that we have in the state, is because it is the tie to the ability to pay is really the idea that the idea your ability to pay is tied to the value of your property. And so you can see that in property taxes, you can see that it's the highest burden for the lowest income classes. And it is, more regressive than our excise and sales taxes that do exist in Montana. And we always like to set the stage related to our system that we're dealing with now, and it just kind of creates difficulties in how we are meeting our service expectations for the public, and with tools that are really restrictive. So setting that stage, Jessica's going to start talking a little bit about how the system works, how the appraisals work, and how it is reflected on your actual tax bills.
Not to stand in front of the projector there. So this is an appraisal notice. So every 2 years, the state of Montana reappraises residential property. Some of the other property classes, as far as forest and agricultural, and some of those are still on a different time period. But residential property and commercial property are reappraised every 2 years now in that cycle. So this is something that started a little while ago, way back when it was every 6 years. They changed that so that there wouldn't be these huge leaps. And then of course, COVID happened and our property values exploded, and we now have huge leaps again. So in odd numbered years, the Department of Revenue sends out these appraisal notices to the property owners. And this document has what your property was assessed at the previous year. So Montana law requires the state to assess the property, determine the value of the property, and that has to be at market value. So those are both things that are set in Montana law. It's the state that determines the value, and state law that says it has to be at the market value, which is what it would sell for. Barring extreme circumstances of any kind. So on this appraisal notice here, so those of you who are property owners would have received this last June. We have what the amount was, what the assessed value was in the previous year, and that's the market value, the current assessed value, and then what they do is they put in this column over here, they say based on the number of mills that were levied by the local jurisdictions last year. And so a mill is basically just a unit of value. So, we'll assess 400 mills and the county will assess 350 mills, and that's just sort of a unit of value that is a little more complicated than we need to go into for purposes of these exercises today. But so if all the local governments were to assess the same number of mills in this year as they did in the previous year, this is what your tax bill would be. Last year, I know that there were a lot of news articles about it, and the Department of Revenue went all over the state and had meetings with people to help explain what these revenue notices are. Nobody's taxes were actually what it shows here, and the reason for that is that Montana property taxes are capped, so local governments can only raise property taxes at half the average rate of inflation for previous years. And so all of us combined, levied 900 mills last year. We weren't allowed to levy 900 mills this year. Everybody had to levy fewer. So these numbers, that number in that last column, really kind of caused a bit of an uproar last year because everybody received this notice, which again is required to be printed in state law, that has to be in there. And so there was a lot of heartburn last year, and people's taxes did go up, but they didn't go up to the amount that their appraisals showed that they would. So in this appraisal process, folks can also, if you think, hey, my property would not sell for that, there is an appeal process through the state. A lot of properties did that in this most recent appraisal year. The appraisal that was done last year for 2023 is the same amount that it's going to be this year. unless you've made significant improvements to your home, and they know that because of permits and things like that, and then there may be a new value assigned, but otherwise, this is going to be the same value for the 2024 property taxes that come out in the fall. It's going to have that same value, and then we won't get another one of these notices until June of 2025. Okay, this is your property tax bill. It's really small in here. You do have one in your packet. I didn't print it in color, it's just gray. So this is what the property tax bill looks like. Some of you who own property have seen this before. There's a number of components to it. So this top portion of the tax bill is based on the taxable value of the property. So that is what was set by the Montana Department of Revenue when they said, your home is worth this much, this is the market value, and then they have a multiplier that again is in state law, and they take the market value and determine the taxable value from that. So in Montana, for residential properties, it's 1.35. So it's the market value times 1.35%, which then gives you a taxable value way down here in the lower corner. And that's what they start multiplying by those mills that I kind of touched on really briefly. So this top portion of your tax bill here is directly reflected by the property value. So how much your property is worth, that really impacts those numbers. This portion down here, just a little bit, these are the city road it's smaller on my screen. So this top portion here is carried down into this line here, and you'll see this property is in taxing district 1.1. So this particular bill is for a home that is of median value in the city's largest taxing district. So that's Missoula County Public Schools rather than the Hellgate School District, and it doesn't have any special SIDs, and it's not in an urban renewal district. So the majority of the tax bills in Missoula look like this, but some of them are going to have some differences with target range or urban renewal districts. So anyway, this portion up here is carried down to this portion down here. Now, special assessments, this section down here, this includes a number of things, and so that is the city road and park districts. City general fund is in the top portion, along with county and schools, both state and local schools. And this portion down here with the special assessments, that includes city road and park district. Those are based on that value of your home. It also includes other special districts, like the water quality district, and a residential home is going to be the same, going to pay the same for the water quality district regardless of the value, so that's not based on it. So that next section, some of them are based on the value of the property, and some of them are just a flat dollar amount. And the other thing that will show up in this section for folks is if you have a street lighting district or SIDs or sidewalk projects, those will show up in that portion of the bill. Excuse me. This portion down here at the bottom shows the taxable value and the market value, and those are what is determined by the Montana Department of Revenue with those assessment notices that get sent out every other year. They take that value, multiply it by the total number of mills that are levied by the schools, the county, the city, and the special districts. Mountain Line is one of our districts that also levies mills. They multiply that number of mills by the value, and that gets us to this total up here of what you're paying. So when in the previous example for the assessment notice, when that went out and it said we're going to assess 900 mills and that's why your property taxes are this much, you can see on here this year we actually, all the districts together levied 772 mills as opposed to the 900 that they did last year. So that's why those estimates were so far off, because all of these governmental units had to levy fewer mills than they did previously. So there's some fun math here. And I will, I forgot to get this presentation to Kalina, but I will get it to Kalina so that she can share it with everybody and you can have all these to reference as well. Okay, so that's all the property taxes. This is how property taxes in Missoula are distributed. So about a third of your taxes go to the City of Missoula. The largest portion here is the schools. So you've got local school districts and you have state school districts. Special districts are again going to be like Mountain Line and the Water Quality District on there. And then the county is about 20% of it. Stuff that's included in the county includes the library and Fort Missoula and the open space bonds. Those are all included in the county because those are countywide districts, and the library as well. Okay. This one? No, this is done. Okay. So as far as the items that show up on your tax bill, and you do have this chart as a handout as well, because I know it would be kind of hard to read up here. But these are the city departments that are funded by your property taxes in some way. Now, for purposes of this presentation, we kind of refer to property taxes as one entity. So the city taxes some of them are actually taxes, and that's the general fund, which showed up on that top part of the bill. There's also the road and park districts. Those are technically special assessments and not taxes. We sort of roll them all together for purposes of this, just because they all do come to you on your tax bill. And so the departments that are funded by your property taxes and your road and park districts are highlighted here. The green departments are the general fund, which is the majority of the property taxes. That's where that goes. Park districts are in purple. The road districts are in orange. And you can see that most of our operations are funded by that, but we have things like wastewater, the water utility, other things like that have their own revenue sources. So your property taxes don't go to the wastewater treatment plant, that's your sewer bill. So this chart just kind of shows you which city functions are funded by your property taxes.
One thing I might jump in to say on that chart is it's also a good illustration of our revenue restrictions, and I think, Jessica put the green boxes up as our general fund, and that's a good color because those can be spent on any legal expenditure for the city. We could, council could choose to spend general fund money on things like parks or the utilities or anything like that, but it doesn't go the other way. So every other color are really restricted for that purpose. Road district is orange. That funding can only be spent on our roads. Parks district can only be spent on related to parks. So we can't take money from the parks district, say, and put it in the general fund for other purposes. Those restrictions, the only revenues we can do that with are general.
This chart just kind of shows a breakdown of where that tax money, again, so the general fund and the road and the park district, how that is spent, where it comes from. So about half our general fund comes from taxes and assessments. Another portion of it comes from the state in the form of entitlement funds, which are things that the state collects money for and then redistributes back to the localities. We have some grant funding, and we have some fees for service in some functions. So, yes, our Parks Department is largely funded by the Park District, but if you're taking a class or something like that from them, that money has a fee, and if you go get a permit, that money has a fee with it as well. So, but the overwhelming, or at least half of our general fund comes directly from property taxes. Our expenditures, this is where it gets pretty difficult. So this is, again, our general fund and our road and park district. You can see fire is 20%, police is 23%. That's close to half of our entire tax budget goes to public safety. Most people don't want us to have fewer firefighters and fewer police officers and fewer fire trucks, so those departments, are a very large portion. Public Works and Mobility and Transportation, That's a big department as well. That's our road district. And you can kind of look at, some of these other things here. We have central and administrative services. That's everything that's an administrative service. So that's our finance department that pays our bills and pays our employees. That's our human resources department, which trains and recruits and all that for our employees. It's also our IT department, so that's all our technology. That central and administrative services there's a lot of functions that go in there. And then you can see things like the health department, the mayor and council, municipal court and city attorney. Those are a pretty small portion. So overwhelmingly, our tax base is funded by, is going toward our public safety and our roads. Mm-hmm.
Is this pretty similar to like percentage-wise other cities and how what allocation of money?
I don't know that we've ever looked at that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's pretty typical. We do have some benchmarking with other cities. It doesn't get into the granular piece of what like on a departmental basis. But typically in our peer cities, the public safety functions are big aspects and really tax supported. I think what I would say is Parks and Rec in Missoula is probably a larger budget than most other cities in Montana. But otherwise, I think we're pretty similar. And that would be like on a per capita basis, right? So I'll just touch on the budget process a little bit. We do a months-long process. It's ruins everybody's summer. We're going to try to fix that a little bit this year on the way we approach it. But just under the charter, it's one of the mayor's responsibilities is to present a budget to council for council's approval. This is a draft approach this year that's a little bit different than prior years, but we will, starting in May and June, rather than the executive budget coming out first, followed by departmental presentations, we're going to we're going to do the big departmental presentations early on to get public feedback and council feedback related to that. And then in July, the mayor will do a presentation on her strategic priorities, and then later on actually do the executive budget closer to when we get our values from the state. Montana is a little bit strange, is that our fiscal year starts on July 1. We don't actually know our tax dollars until the first Monday in August. And so we end up adopting our budget. We have done times where the city has adopted its budget on July 1 and then based on projections and then adjusted as necessary. And essentially you have to kind of do two budget processes and a mini one. The last few years we've been doing that once, and we're still planning to do that this year, even though we're trying to front load a lot of the work in May and June. So it's just a little bit easier for staff, council, and the public that way. And then once we get our certified taxable values, which tells us what our property tax revenues are, then we can do council deliberations and the final adoption in August, ahead of our statutory deadline, which is the end of August. Just one of the things that, inflation's been a big topic for everyone. For us in particular, local government inflation is tracking a lot higher than other industries. And these are some of the examples that we've been having to deal with. Just the cost per linear foot of water main, for example, up there is up 66% in just the last few years. Type 1, the traditional engines that we have in fire, are up 53% just since 2020. And it's like $1 million now for a fire engine. And then this goes into some of the benchmarking that we talked about. And what we've tried to do here is create an apples to apples comparison of us to our peer cities. And what this does is it includes property taxes and special districts, citywide special districts. And those special districts are in Missoula are a road and park district. And now in other cities, they have a lot of special districts as well. They don't, not all of them use taxable value as a basis of assessment. So there are things like lot square footage or linear feet of front footage on certain types of districts. Like, that's a common one on streets districts, is that it's the amount of street in front of your house is what they base that assessment on. So what we've done is try to use tried to make a comparison by treating all of those revenues from all those citywide districts the same for every jurisdiction, and tried to get an apples to apples comparison on what that means. And so this chart shows what the mill rate is in all of these peer cities if everyone used their mill values and taxable values for all of their districts. And what this shows is, and it makes sense, is we're all kind of in the same kind of place because we're all living under the same legal construct here. It's just where those funds coming from. So Missoula is kind of in the middle of the pack here. Now what you do notice is that Missoula, if you look at the blue column there, that's what is strictly shown as property taxes. And we do have the highest level of property taxes proper in the state, but we also have the lowest level of or among the lowest level of special district assessments. And that's just because Missoula was late to the party on special districts. Our road and park districts were established in 2010. Most other cities had special districts starting in the 70s. So we just have a smaller portion of our local government expenditures are in our special districts. But it's about the same. But when you look at it, we're about the same on a mill value to our peer cities.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You might have said this, but can you explain bills?
Yeah, I'll try. So the term mill is percent is to the 100th. And a mill is to the 1,000th. So when you think about it, it's the allocation of essentially of a percentage to an additional decimal point. So that's just the math around it. And so what the city does is we apply that mill to our taxable value. And so what the state's job is, and just went through, they do the assessed value, then they apply statutory tax rates to the value value of your home that was assessed, and that value is the amount that we apply our mills to, and that mill rate that we talked about, and 200 on this chart, 264 mills. If you actually divided that by 1,000, that's the percentage you would try, but it's those points. So if you multiply your taxable value that is on your tax bill or your assessment notice times the number of mills divided by 1,000 to convert it to that millage, that percent. That's how that mill. So it's really that. What it is that description of our tax rate, and that's how it's expressed.
Another way to say it is this document you gave us that a mill is $50,000.
That number is just made up for simplicity
Right,
in the exercise. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's a great example. So that number, that 150,000 that's in your workbooks, is the amount that the city gets if it places one mill on the ballot. That's the amount of revenue the city gets from that, and that can be divided by, and that's the addition of all the taxable values of all the properties in the city.
So just to kind of state it another way, so a mill. The value of a mill is 1/1,000th of the taxable value of all the property in the city of Missoula. So Again, just not real numbers, throwing these out, so last year, a mill might have been worth $125,000 in the city of Missoula, and then all those property values went up and all those taxable values went up, and now a mill is worth $150,000. So we levy fewer of them in order to get the same amount of money. So it's sort of, mills are kind of complicated. I just like to pretend that it's, a unit of value. It's just like one egg, it's one mill. We're levying a specific number of them. And all the communities are different too. So, where a mill might be worth $150,000 in Missoula, you look at property values in Bozeman, it's probably worth $200,000. And so they levy fewer mills as well. So there's a lot of things that kind of go into it.
Can you repeat what you said about the cap?
So, I'm going to
So
pop that one to Dale.
yeah, so our property tax limitations are, they're simple to say, but they're complicated in their application. So in our property tax mill, so this doesn't, our road and park district aren't subject to the same limitations. But what the city is allowed to do is, it's a dollar levy, it's a dollar limitation. So we are allowed to levy the amount of dollars that we were allowed to levy in the prior year, plus 1/2 of the rate of inflation, plus the value of new construction. That's what our tax base growth is
So
on.
in dollars, just not mills.
Yeah, it's not mills. And you often hear us say, there's some people will say mill levy cap, and that's not really true. And so we have to, in like last year, we had a large value increase of not new construction in all of your properties. And we had to lower our levies because we're not allowed to take all of that. And our levies were lowered by across all of our districts. It's more in just like our general fund, but 12, like a little over 12%. But that wasn't enough to accommodate because everybody's property taxes went up. But that part of it is that we were getting some of the new revenue from that. Parts of that is new revenues to other jurisdictions, and part of that is the shift from, we had centrally assessed properties in Missoula got pretty significant decreases, and so that's part of that as well. So these questions are a good segue to this. Jessica mentioned, so this is if everything was converted to mills, but this doesn't take into account the varying values of different cities. And so to try to account for that, we do this. We do a benchmarking that is just revenue per person. And so what we're doing in this instance is we're adding up all of the taxes and assessments from all of our peer cities, and we're dividing it by the population. So that's, we think that's a simple way to get a fair, like, how much are we charging per person in all of these cities? And that's what this shows is again, we're still in line with our peers. Bozeman is one of the fastest growing areas in the country. Growth, and this is a whole new other conversation, growth doesn't pay for itself. And so those kind of things happen in these fast growing communities. But Missoula here is still in line within in our peer cities, which makes, we're all within the same legal framework again, I'll say that. And this is kind of a little bit of a discussion of, I mentioned this, that growth doesn't pay for itself in our system here. And this is hard to read, but the dark bars at the bottom is the amount of new revenues we get from new construction in the last 10 years there, whatever many years that is, 8 years. And so you can see it's just, we just don't, it doesn't move our needle very much on the total revenues, and it's a frustration everybody. You see all this growth around you, but that's what we're getting out of it related to our entire tax base. It's just not, it's not significant. In fact, it doesn't even, typically, with a couple of exceptions, you can see some of the big years, it doesn't even, our revenues from new construction doesn't even cover our general fund salary increases, let alone new things or trying to keep up with growth. And then finally, this slide shows. We're able to account for on a budget basis exactly where our new revenues from increases in property taxes and our districts, and we want to consider those all as taxes. They're all on your tax bill. So road district, park district, and this is a pie chart that shows exactly where those goes. And you can see related to new requests in our FY24 budget, new staffing accounted for 4.5%. We started a new program in encampment response and neighborhood and security. Those are those pie charts in the corner. But you see here, 57% really of our salary increases, and this is probably even consistent with prior years, and maybe even a little lower. Is that these are really go to our existing employees and our union contracts, and just trying to keep pace with inflation and market related to our salaries. So 57% of that of our new revenues from taxes went to existing wages for existing employees, and you can see most of that is in our public safety, as Jessica was alluding to. They're just really big parts of our tax-funded obligations. So with that, we're gonna happy to take some more questions, and then we're gonna be around to help with the exercise and stuff too.
And before we go to questions, I realized I forgot to tell you what other information is on this particular sheet. So that very first bullet there is a page that we have on the city website where we try to help folks understand the property taxes more globally. That also has links on there to the Montana Department of Revenue's page, where you can find out all about those assessments if that's something you're still curious about. Your property tax bills, whether you're a homeowner or a renter, if you're a renter, you can still look up the property tax for your landlord's property. That's all by address. Directly, the property appraisal information is down there as well. We have some links on the budget on how to get engaged in it as we start that process. Dale went over the timeline. When we get to the budget kickoff, our website, Engage Missoula, will have budget information on there. We kind of put the overview on Engage Missoula, and then we have the nitty-gritty, really detailed documents for all the nerds we have those on our regular website. And you can sign up for notifications throughout the budget process so that you can see all of that. And then also links to Missoula County and the school district to find where their budget information is as well. So that's what's on there. And then we can take questions.
Yes.
You have
I do have a question. And I apologize, I missed the first 2 minutes of the motion. We covered this, but I was curious to what extent our tax structure is restricted by state law, and to what extent we have the flexibility to choose how we do that.
Yeah, so on our property taxes, our general fund is that property tax limitation. That is, we can only grow our, and I'll even go into some of the exceptions we have. Our general fund is largely is simply that we can only raise it by half the rate of inflation plus the amount of new construction, and those are that's the general fund. Our districts, our road and park districts that were established in 2010, are really governed by the mechanism and the resolutions that were in place under that law at the time. And so the limitation there is use. Parks can only be used for those operations that are under parks, and you can't use them for police or fire, right? And then roads the same way. And so that's how those works.
I suppose I was more referring to the very beginning when I saw the pie chart of the breakdown. You talked about the regressive tax, property taxes. And you showed the breakdown of how it's structured in most of our property taxes as opposed to other local governments. And then I was curious how that kind of, is that structure set out by our state law, or is that something that we choose to do as a city, or what flexibility do we have other than that?
Yeah, it's statutory, so we don't have the ability to do any other forms of taxes except for property taxes, and those are, so. Yeah.
Kind of a two-part question. First part was on the tax bill. Do any of these levies ever end? And the second question is, sorry, just curious.
No, it's a good
Um,
question.
Me, it's a great question.
And I believe we have 6 urban renewal districts.
Yes.
How does that compare to our other sister cities in Montana? Like,
Yes.
what does Bozeman have, what does Billings have? Do you have a
Yeah.
slide for that?
I don't, and I don't have that data. Well, let me ask you your first question first is, I'll only speak to city ones. The ones that are existing today that have an expiration are debt service. So our previously voter-approved bond issues that were approved by the voters, those have a sunset. And they will come off when those are paid off. In fact, some of them are really close, but they're not big compared to the entire thing. And then our road and park districts also have legal sunsets, but because we have debt, and it's really kind of tied to the level of debt we have underlying it right now. So that's how those are. But general fund. And we have general fund, and we have a conservation lands maintenance levy that's in perpetuity. That's 4 months.
And as far as the urban renewal districts go, as far as the total number of districts, I can't speak to the other cities. I feel like a year or two ago, I was asked to make a chart as far as the percentage of the total value of the community. And I think Missoula was at that time at about 8%, and I think the next closest city was 6.5, 7 of the total value that's in the urban renewal district. So I think that we were a little bit higher, but we weren't, skyrocketing compared to others.
Right. Just curious with the 6 urban renewal districts, how much annually is Emory getting?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but what they account for about 10% of the tax base are in the city, in the districts.
A couple times we've talked about inflation being the state factor with its increases. What is the actual equation for determining that inflationary rate, or who determines that?
Yeah, it is I'm not going to get the definition exactly right. It's statutory, and it's a 3-year average of state CPI, and then there's also a population factor in there. But what we're given every year is the number. So we just get Department of Revenue census. Your inflation rate for this year is 0.87%, or something like that.
Is that based on locality, or is it just for the whole state of Montana?
It's both. The inflation rate is based on the statewide rate, and then they do a population adjustment based on county populations.
I think actually we're going to, so cities, 8 silver bills, and they're taxing for financing 20% of their tax base. Do you recall that?
I know.
We
they have
don't
to-
usually include them in our major city calculations simply because they're a consolidated city county.
Right.
Yeah, so it's less of an apples to apples, so we don't always have them in there.
Yeah, but
Can you repeat that question?
so Butte Silverbow is a consolidated city county, but they have a robust tax increment financing program. I think most, if not all, cities in Montana have tax increment financing, but it is different in different cities. But Butte Silverbow, I do believe it is a robust program, but since it's combined city county, it is not exactly equating to Missoula, but I think they use it quite extensively.
Yeah, they have historically, and then also the smaller towns and counties that have them they're typically really. I mean, we try to compare ourselves to the urban cities, but there are lots of districts that are just really big compared to in the rural areas in particular.
Hamilton just created theirs in the last couple of years, so it's used across Montana. Okay, we are going to take a 5 to 7 minute break, and then when we come back, I'm going to talk you through the budget exercise. I will have you get your pens. We're going to make a few changes on numbers. We worked on these, and there's always a few things in place, but it's all right in terms of updating them. So take 5, 7 minutes, and then come back. I think we're going to have one person from this But afterwards, I recommend you go next door to the Mar Bar and have a beer. You need detox after doing the budget. So, and continue this social life, which is awesome. I love the community, actually. People have really enjoyed local government and just meeting other people. So, first of all, I'm going to talk you through some of these documents. So if you want to pull this one up, these are just kind of some guiding principles. And we're going to talk through them. A lot of this Dale and Jessica just covered, but it helps to repeat it a little bit. So number one, there are certain sections of the city budget that we are mandated by law to fund, and we do not have the discretion to cut them. As an example, municipal court. We have to have a municipal court. We have to have a city attorney's office. They have to prosecute cases, and they have to have speedy trials. That takes a certain level of infrastructure, and it is also the court system is a separate arm of government, so I would say it's a pretty collaborative process funding them, but we don't just get to say as city council, no more municipal court. We don't get to go there. So there's a big chunk of our budget, first of all, over which we have no discretion. Number two, most city employees are union, and we have collective bargaining agreements with them that last for 4 years typically. For those who are non-union, we tend to track the union cost of living increases so that they also have those benefits. For the purpose of this exercise, we are just going to say that the cost of living increase is 3% for this year, which is about on par with what we typically do, anywhere from 2 to 3.5%. So we're just averaging that across all employees. So all of our labor costs for this budget year that you will be working on are 3%, and those are going up, that 3%, okay? Number three, new revenue from the general fund comes from two calculations, either new development or remodels, or higher property valuations. Okay, at the end of this, I'm going to tell you what that number is. So we have our baseline of what our general fund revenue was last year, and then I'm going to tell you what the new taxable and new values, what extra you get, okay, to work with from our baseline coming up. Number four, you should read that one. Typically, increase in property tax revenues do not pay to maintain the level of service for inflation, meaning salary increases, utility costs, etc., let alone any service expansion. That means new programs. So we are always trying to climb that mountain every year with our budget. If your table decides to raise taxes, you have to do it by the increments that we work with, which means using a mill. So we've given you the equation there. 1 mill equals 150,000 in new revenue. Okay? And then that equates to $1.35 on $100,000 worth of property, value of property in the city. So you have your equation, number 5. Number 6, you're going to decrease level of, so if you want to cut services or staff, make budget work, you can assume that one full-time employee, including benefits, is $100,000. Okay, that's an average for the purposes of this exercise, but it's relatively realistic because benefits are a significant component of what we're paying. So say someone makes $55,000, there's a lot of benefits and taxes on top of that. Number 7, the general fund has $350,000 in cash beyond the reserve requirements. Under state law, we have a goal of trying to have 7% of our budget in a rainy day fund, basically. So what this is saying is you've got $350,000 in cash above the threshold, which is great. This is a good thing to have. You've got extra money in that account. For purposes of this exercise, we did not include the enterprise funds, which are wastewater, stormwater, water. They are funded by, not ration, but rates. Sorry, that's a typo. You pay your water rates, in other words, you pay your water bill every month. That's how those are funded. So that is a separate silo from all of this stuff that you're going to be working on, which is general fund, road district, and parks district. So you don't even have to worry about the utilities, not part of the exercise tonight. Okay, this was discussed, but I'm going to go over it one more time just because it's a bit complicated. For the purpose of this exercise, and in reality, the road district and park district are not capped. Okay? You can raise those. There is no ceiling on those. However, you can only use the road and park district for those departments. You cannot take money from those road and park districts and put them towards the municipal court. Okay? Only parks, only roads. However, the general fund is capped. I'll say it again, we are capped at half the rate of inflation average for the last 3 years. So since we've actually had some significant inflation recently, I put it at 4% as the 3-year average, which means we are capped at raising the general fund by 2%. Okay? Now, if everybody's looking at this page, get your pen out, because I'm going to change a couple numbers, and then we'll go on. Sorry, not everything got updated from last year. For the very last sentence, the general fund mill levy cap will be 1.2 million. Strike out 1,170,000, just put 1.2 million. The nice thing, that's an easier number to work with. Which is 2% of, you can strike out the 58 million and put in 60,155,000. 60155,000. So sorry that was not updated. Yes?
Could you explain number 6 again, especially the second phrase?
Sure.
I understand the first
Okay.
phrase, but it's.
So, and everybody, just before we move on, everybody got that change down at the bottom. What this number is, 1.2 million, if you're gonna raise taxes for the general fund, you can only go up 1.2 million, period. Can't go to 1.5 million, okay? Now, going back up to 6, you can decide to decrease if you wanna cut staffing. Assume that one full-time employee is 100,000. And you normally maintain the same level of funding for operating expenses, you cannot decrease it. Okay, so what that means is you cannot cut from municipal court. You cannot, so the things on the first page that we talked about how we don't have any discretion, you cannot cut from those items. All right? You can cut from fire, police, parks, things like that, but not the items listed in number 1. And we also, it references here the fact that we have collective bargaining agreements. You cannot cut salaries, but you can cut staff. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so these are kind of your, and we are here to answer questions. We'll walk around, but hopefully this at least starts to paint the picture. All right, the blue sheet. This is your budget worksheet here. You broke down all of the different departments and put in the first column, FY 2024, what the personnel and supplies cost. And then we put in 3% cost of living increase. We didn't even address supplies or any of that, to keep it simple. We're only looking at cost of living increase for staffing. We put that in, and now you've got your baseline for FY 2025 for the next year. So the one at the top is City Council, personnel, 400,000. Baseline, we're going to go up by 10,000. So for 2025, our baseline budget is 410,000. And no, you cannot cut us. Sorry about that. We are here in duration. So this. If you look at this sheet and you look all the way to the back, so those are all the different departments. On the back page, first of all, for general fund, it is tallied. Last year, we had folks trying to add this up, so we added it up for you. So the total for the prior year, FY 2024, for the general fund was $59,155,000. Okay? With the cost of living increase of 3%, the new baseline for the general fund is $60,715,000. It went up by about 1.5 million. That's an important number there. So to just maintain service, we've got to close that gap of 1.5 million plus, all right? Now you've got the road district and the park district. Same analysis on the figures. You've got last year's budget, 2024. For road district, it was 7.8 million. Got 200,000 in cost of living increase just for staff. It's going to go up to 8 million. You guys tracking with this? Does this make sense?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So this is what your departments cost and what the total is going to be, and now you know what they're broken down into. Okay. Next, we've got new requests. Every year there are new requests for all sorts of different reasons. Because our world changes, because our city grows. So do you have this orange? Actually, we have to pass these out. Yeah. Sorry. We're going to pass these out to you. Where you just go. Wait till you get it. Sorry. Yeah. I would say they are around just the numbers. There's 4 people. And that's what they said because I was trying to make it easy. Yes, no, it's all right. But we can't because I would say, but like, right, yeah, like, extra yeah. So there's your orange sheet here. So that's, but then that's, you know, there's 4 who want to cut this down. Okay, so let's talk through the new requests.
Because it's not everything that's not in here.
So, city council, all of the departments come in, they talk to city council, they give us the new requests, and they're all great usually, and we want to do a lot. But for right now, IT, information technology, we have a huge amount of email and technology and computers. We have a department that has to deal with all of that. They're spending so much time on overtime, they need more capacity. So 80,000 to hire someone, but it'll save you 40,000 in overtime. All right? Fire, I'm
So,
gonna,
Can we say then that the new request is really 40,000?
yeah, correct.
Is that 40,000 in overtime professionally?
Well, if you hire another person, then you don't have to pay overtime anymore. Right now, they have so much work and only so much staff, so they're having to work extra. So, you will eliminate the overtime cost, which is good. Fire, they need a new fire station. Has anybody heard this before? They need more capacity. You'll need to read through this and take a few minutes, but the bottom line is it's such high numbers that the recommendation is to go to the voters to see if they want to fund this or not. All right? Mobile support team, request number 3. This has been a highly successful program. It has helped immensely in our community. It's taken pressure off of police and fire and greatly helped those who need that type of help at a crucial time. Still looking for permanent funding for it. Right now there's a request for $400,000 to keep that program alive. All right. Public Works. Although we didn't have snow this winter, we probably will next winter. They are asking for 2 new full-time employees and 2 snowplows. $300,000. Because as a city councilor, I get lots of emails from people who want their street plowed. So that's an issue. Police, their old bulletproof vests, the Kevlar vests, they do time out after a while, they expire. They need new ones for the entire force because they have to be personally fitted to them. It's a safety issue. All right, additionally, the police need 1 more vehicle. We did a full, a lot of this is based on truth. Several years ago, we did a police study. We figured out we didn't really need more police. What we needed to do was shift the schedules and be more efficient with how we use them. So as a result, we did not increase police. We shifted around and made it work with our current staffing. They need one more vehicle in order for that to truly work. They're short a vehicle, and it is, because of that, it is impacting how they're covering the city. Parks and Rec, Fort Missoula, it needs new tennis courts. They have aged out. They're full of cracks. They can't be used at this point. The public schools use them, as well as some private schools, for their tennis teams, and they are used privately by all sorts of people throughout the year. So that can be debt service, $80,000 for 10 years to get those done. All right, but if we don't do them, they literally can't be used. And typically in our freeze-thaw cycle, they last 15 years because with the rent that the school systems pay when they use those for their teams, we took that money over the years and we would seal the cracks. So we got 4 extra years out of them, but now they have to be redone. Okay. And what else? Community planning, Johnson Street Emergency Winter Shelter, $800,000. ARPA dollars are gone. We now need to fund that out of the general fund. This is all true, by the way. And finally, Missoula Aging Services requests $20,000 for increased demand for Meals on Wheels program. It is literally a crucial program that keeps people alive. Many of them are homebound. The county's going to kick in more, and we've been asked also. Okay, so these are your new requests. This sheet is your mills. So if you're raising taxes, this is your equation to know how to raise these taxes. It's in there someplace. There you go. This is your equation to know how, in other words, you need X amount of dollars, that's going to equate to X amount of mills. Okay, the last thing, most important thing, find your beige sheet, your yellow or beige sheet. We got to change some numbers. I'm sorry, we worked on this and didn't get this one updated, but I will give you the new numbers now. So, pull this sheet up, get a pen. For general fund for FY 2024, cross out 58 million and insert 59,155,000. 59155,000. Just look up at me when you're done, so I know you got it. I feel like it's the SRA testing. Okay. Then go over to FY 2025, general fund. And this is what you got for revenue. 60,155,000. All right, tax base went up by 1 million. So that is the new revenue you have, and that is your new total, 60,155,000. Then go down to the road district. Road district should be 7.8 million.
In which year, sorry?
FY 2024. Your tax base increase was 100,000, so your new revenue in the road district is 7.9 million. And then we're going to go down to park district and do the same thing. Park district cross out 6.8 million and put in 8,950,000. You got 100,000 in extra revenue. FY 2025 for the park district is 9,050,000. So 9,050,000.
So that mill levy also changes, right, to 1.2?
We're not going to deal with that for the purpose of this exercise.
The mill levy capped at?
Well, yeah. So that, you can go to the number that I gave you that we changed. That's the correct number, basically.
1.2.
Correct. Yep. So your cap is one. So you got 60,155,000 in revenue for the general fund. Okay. If you want to raise it, you can only go 1.2 million higher. You're capped. Right. Finally, I think this just helps with the math. You can just jot some notes down at the bottom. So the general fund with this 3% cost of living increase, you have a deficit of $560,000. Okay, for the deficit. The 1 million didn't cover the gap of 1.5 million. Does that make sense?
Say the deficit again.
So with the general fund, with the 3% cost of living increase with staff across the entire city, the general fund baseline went up by about 1.5 million, but you only got 1 million in new revenue. So you have a deficit of 560,000. You're gonna have to either cut staff or raise taxes to fill the gap. With the road district and park districts, you have deficits of 100,000 in each. Okay? And this is actually an easier budget than I've seen in a fair amount of my years on council. So, 100,000 each, 100,000 each parks, 100,000 in roads, that's a deficit. Because the new revenue did not close the gap in terms of the cost of living increase. So your table needs to come up with your budget. How are you going to balance this budget? Okay, and I think we'll take about 30 minutes, and city councilors will walk around and answer questions. All right. What do we do now? Like how much does it Is that your number?
Maybe, well, definitely the city council. I don't know if we can, I know we can't cut the mayor herself.
So slash mayor's, it says slash mayor's office.
Slash mayor's office, okay, so we might not even be able to cut the mayor's office for a sheet of paper.
Oh,
So you don't take the that's where I was.
Was that number, that 60,000, is that a true number from the budget that you found? Is what the
It's
mayor
just
is?
when last election cycle or whatever, that's what the mayor makes, is about 60,000.
Oh, okay.
They were gonna give themselves a raise, but I don't know if they did.
Oh, okay.
And like the city council, they make a stipend, it's 15,000 a year.
Okay.
It's
considered like a quarter.
But they're definitely much more than quarter time. They spend a
So
lot
I
of
get
time.
Mr. Nugent to come over here.
To see how proficient Mr. Nugent is.
I thought they made like 180.
I thought it was only 60.
Oh, they don't make, they make way more than that.
See, what we need to find that.
Yeah.
We'll get on.
No, I think, I remember Johnny gave himself a raise at one point.
Mr. Nugent. Hi. Hi. We have questions.
All right.
Okay. How much does the mayor make?
The mayor is the lowest paid department head by far. It's like 99,000.
It is that much now. Okay. So not about 100 grand. So
When it says we can't cut, like we obviously can't cut like the city council or the mayor, but like you can cut things from that office
Yeah,
theoretically,
you can cut a
right?
position. So when
Yeah.
you can't cut salary,
Right.
Yeah.
you have to cut a position to cut salary, because most of the salaries are union.
But in
So
terms
what
of
we
like
need is
these
guidelines for the
offices,
position.
like we don't know how many positions are in these
and to know
categories,
how-
so
and
like
to know how important.
Yeah, this
it
is very, very broad.
like is the
we
mayor's
don't
office
know.
like 20 people or like
Yeah,
5?
The mayor's office, like actual full-time people, it's Heidi, Dale, the mayor, and maybe Jeannie Marion.
Okay.
And that's about it.
So the ladies running this, what are they
They're
paid
the
off
Office
of?
of Neighborhoods, which is under CPDI.
Right. Yeah, who we heard from last week.
Right.
Okay, so are they on this sheet?
Things that we can't cut on here.
so we can't cut
No.
council?
I didn't
you can
make this
cut things
activity,
from-
so I can tell you cut whatever you
Like, I
want.
just help us. I just want to make sure.
So
that
you can cut things from those
You can.
offices. You just can't cut the city council positions or,
Because you would
or do
have
salary
to,
cuts.
yeah, city council would have to pass a resolution to change the wards, and the voters would have to say.
Yeah. But like if they have like 20
So,
administrative
and
staff,
according to
we can cut
this
like
sheet, like things like the Poverello.
But we're still back to those same
all those other
problems.
things. Look, we're not even counting
the
our
allocations.
Those,
and all of
where are you
this.
looking?
Well, in just our budget.
Oh yeah, this is like a very watered down.
Okay.
So it's like, yeah, the city has a contract with a Poverello, a couple different things. That's not.
Yeah, none of that is on here, but like, isn't that an additional, I mean, we could cut from that.
I mean, you
pretend
certainly could. I think
bring
that,
it over.
I think that this exercise is just trying to illustrate like
this is
kind
challenging.
of where it's challenging and where kind of buckets of money come from.
Yeah, because then she put this in here about funding the
Question to Johnson Street.
Yes, but where in here is, you know.
So
does it come from
this
housing?
is complicated. It would be under CPDI. Because it's operated by community planning, whatever. But right now, the Johnson Street Shelter is funded by ARPA money, which was one-time COVID federal government money. It's half funded by the city and half funded by the county. And all that ARPA money is going away. So that's actually a real example.
maybe we should start with like the new requests and see if there's any that we're like for sure we want to do or for sure we don't, and then see
where government budgets start, because it's easier. Like you kind of look at it as a main line, but a lot of us talk about like it'd be nice to shift like priority-based to zero-based budgeting where you start over every year. But it's really hard to start over every year. You kind of have to like dissect every department. So we're kind of hoping to, in this new cycle that they're doing over a couple of years, we will
transition
zero base everything once.
So if that, so like the mobile support team, who are they under? Police? Fire? So that would
Also
be
currently funded by
ARPA?
So, back to our first class, when we were learning about the structure of our city government, I think it was stated that we have the seat of the most council members. So how is that determined?
So that's determined, council members is a resolution of council. We determine the number of wards. So I mean, council could treat themselves in theory, or the voters could, in the charter, specify specifically. But there's limits in state law based on how many.
that's probably under CPDI
So we could
stuff, like
say
some of the
we
folks we heard from
55
last
council
week
members,
was like the
'cause that's
housing
more than
specialist.
state law.
But is it ultimately based on?
They don't say
Well, it's, yeah, the wards are required
I
to
don't
stay
think
on
development services means CPDI.
within 3% of each
development
other by the population. And right now we have 6 wards with 2 council members per ward. We could have 12 wards with 1 councilman per ward.
Development
Could,
services
in theory,
became part of the state budget.
if the voters wanted to, we could reduce council to 6. I'm very mixed on that. Council is
And central
it wouldn't
services?
save that much money because city council, like, we don't get paid.
Like engineering, I would think that would be
That's
an
also
easy idea. But now it's actually a different now.
No, the council is the equivalent of 3 full-time.
One, the people that present.
So it's like about a third.
All right, so let's use your brain. So housing in this, what is this? Yeah, it just says housing, so what would, housing for who? Is this the homeless housing? Is
But that's the road district, so that's separate from the general fund.
No, that's probably the housing office. So like we have a whole, so CPDI is a massive department. And there's like land use and planning, but then there's also like all the positions that deal with housing equity and affordable housing development, all sorts of things like that. Several positions that we follow.
And developmental services.
Developmental services would be, those would be building permits. Yeah, it's all under CPDI. Plan approval, zoning requests, right-of-way vacation, things like
Okay.
Central
So
services.
where were the
like
requests listed?
catch-all.
Right here. These are the new.
But wasn't there something
Yeah.
more condensed?
There was another sheet too. Yeah, this one.
Oh,
I
okay.
would fall under central services or security. or risk management.
New request.
But again, some of these are really
They're really broad.
to make it an easy exercise because they just give you the whole city budget.
That makes it harder because then you
Yeah,
can go line item by line
exactly.
item and just cut.
Which that's one of the things that we're going to do better in the budget this year. I'm actually really excited about is if you go to the website during this next budget season, every account is going to have a link where you can click on it and give a description of what is actually paid for in that line item and where the requirement to do it. It's like a lot of our things are required by state law. Like we're required to do building permits. And so like you click on that and you can see where it's required and if funding comes from the state. It's like when Dale had the big pie chart up there and that 25% of the general fund comes from money that the state collects and sends back. The state requires us to do a lot more of what we cover in our general fund than 25%. So there's a whole lot of unfunded mandates.
Oh, okay. How many people would you say are in human resources?
Do not know.
We need more than half an
Do
hour.
not know.
I'm suggesting starting with these new requests. And so are we also have a deficit. So do we have, how much can we add? Or can we add?
We can add by doing a mill.
Right.
But we have the milk cap also.
Yeah.
For the
We
general
have to
fund.
add at least the deficit amount, unless we're going to cut that amount.
Unless we're gonna cut from one of these departments, and I'm going developmental services and housing, they're about to get slapped.
Somewhere in the notes, I feel like she said that a new position, we should consider it $100,000.
Yeah.
Because if you factor in benefits,
Right.
insurance, all that. So if you were going to cut personnel, I would say make the argument of cutting that in $100,000 increments and cut personnel. The tough thing there, and you're never going to figure this out in your exercise, is like,
No.
who do you cut and how do you
Right.
do it?
Yeah.
I mean, the city has done that before. Like in the late '90s, they actually went through. There were job cuts, but it's just not common in city government.
Yeah, and I don't think I personally feel comfortable cutting unless I know what we're cutting. Exactly. So I'm not like opposed to cutting, but it's a little hard without knowing like what we're. I mean,
Well,
okay,
I feel
so
Unlike,
meals
these
at
tribes.
Missoula Aging Services line item is the meals on wheels request. Like to me, it's just like it's only $20,000.
So closely.
I really want to fund
What department does that come under?
Well, to know that
yeah.
that. I mean, that's where I go. It's like the lowest.
That would fall under
I think
the
too,
and ultimately that's
like keeping elderly people like fed might also
or
like help
mayor
them
decision where it's like
help prevent them like sliding into homelessness. I feel like so.
So it's like, they
That
need
might
to
be like an
evaluate
upstream way to
one
like
of the
prevent
decisions
some
of
problems.
council and vote in different ways.
Well, I guess, I mean, it is, but I mean, some of them are pretty, I consider, I guess they.
Are we good on questions now?
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Well,
Well, I mean, I'm not leaving.
As much as we are gonna get, that's okay. Yeah. Sorry, what were you saying?
I guess that they consider me older, but I'm like, they're young.
Who's young?
Oh, the Meals on Wheels recipients?
Yes, they're young.
Well, and I think some people aren't necessarily like aging adults, but they're not able to leave their home to go get food.
Missoula Aging Services provides more than Meals on Wheels. They provide a lot of good services.
Oh yeah. I know. My dad delivers for them, so.
So we're tentatively funding that.
And then what department do you think they fall under in this?
Well, they don't match up. They are technically their own department in the city, but they don't match the blue sheet.
Okay.
So we just say we're adding 20,000.
They'll be from that'll be from the general fund.
Oh,
Everything will be
adding
in
it
general
to the
fund
general
except for Parks and Rec and the road, right?
So we've got plus 20,000.
road district. These are
Unless the aging services can do a fund raise a campaign, because people do donate.
Yeah, they do donate, yeah.
Okay.
Well, the county's already
Making it 30.
Yeah.
I love tennis and I love to like fun stuff for kids. I feel like that's a lot of money and
That's a lot of money.
super.
What did it cost critical?
My son plays tennis in high school, and I will tell you that last year it was like a big deal because they didn't have tennis courts. It was a huge deal. Yeah.
So why doesn't that come out of the school budget?
It does. They pay $20,000 a year. Yeah. So, but at the fort, I go to this and too involved in that one. I mean, not too involved, I guess, but I know more about this one. And the schools do pay.
Yeah, that was like covering the chip sealing that they were doing, like the maintenance, right?
Yeah, they were able to get the settle courts resurfaced.
$700,000.
Right, not supposed to tell them. So they didn't have courts. Well, they had to rent them from the university. They had like to play like odd hours and stuff. And the university was terrible. Yeah.
Because they were
But
doing the
we can
play
do
fair courts?
Yeah, they had the play fair courts where like they just couldn't play out last spring. But they did get them done after the season was over. So I don't know if this is like a made up thing.
No, this is about right.
Okay.
I think this is about right. But so this debt service piece over here, though, is that you can have it for like this. So $80,000 per year for 10 years. You would just have to put them on, the schools. So the school and tennis club can donate $100,000, but then if you also charge them yearly.
This could just be like, well, we expect to get this much in rent.
Yeah, I think so. I think we can say like, okay, we're gonna have Big Sky High School pay us X amount. We're gonna have Garden City Tennis Association pay X amount. I don't know.
But can the schools pay, and aren't we going to be voting on money for schools?
No, the schools probably can't pay it. That's not part of our. We don't figure that one out.
Where's the money coming from?
I'm not like firmly opposed. I think we should look at like the more sort of health and safety things before we commit to that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If we're going to do that one, I think we should do more of the debt service on that one versus actually trying to fund it.
I think the debt service too, because I mean, okay, so tennis is like not really that competitive in Montana, is my understanding. At least that's my experience because my son just started playing in 10th grade at the university. You know, so it's not like it's this big deal in Montana, but for a community to not have a tennis courts, I think it would be like kind of an odd thing, especially in the community of our size.
Like the play fair park ones,
But not a yeah, we don't have enough. You know, we don't have enough.
And more old people are playing pickleball.
True.
Right, but they're not talking about pickleball here. They're talking about tennis specifically.
But that's what they do at the fort, is they make it into pickleball.
If we were to look at the percentage of the population that the tennis courts would affect versus what a police car would do for...
Yeah, public safety across the city. No, I totally agree.
So we can think about the tennis courts.
Except for we really don't, so do we, the 600,000, do we really, we don't have to pay it, right? It doesn't have to come out of the budget. Right. Sort of like
If we choose to do this.
We can do the, like, oh, we're gonna get this much every 10 years from the community, from the schools, yeah, so.
I think we should fund the things we really want to fund first.
I would
and
like
then
to see
where we're at.
police officers not die from a bullet.
So Kevlar vests and the police vehicle are important to Joy. Also me, yes.
Yeah, I agree with the Kevlar vest for sure. Yes, that just seems.
Yeah, it does, yeah. I agree with it too, but I just wonder how long they last, and I'm like, what a waste. You have to replace them all the time.
You have to replace them, in reality, I think every 10 years. Yeah, and you have to replace them if they get shot, they're immediately out. They have to be replaced after that. Yeah. And then the police car was what, $100,000, and the Kevlar vest
What was the benefit of the police car again? Do we need that?
Well, because instead of hiring more policemen, they were able to redo shifts, and so that requires another car.
If we could just solve the homeless problem, Sutton tells me what needs so many police or fire departments.
I mean, which is true. That's I feel like none of this stuff is really showing, like you were saying, those like upstream, you know, to like then solve those problems that are down here. None of those funding requests. Mobile support teams to a certain extent.
Yeah, I would,
You know,
almost
childcare.
I think it's
Right, early childhood intervention.
or I think mobile support team is like more important than the police car, honestly, because like I've seen them in action and they're amazing.
So
And
what
they're
do
also
they
way more
do?
than police officers.
They get sent out, so if there's not actually like a criminal thing happening and it's more like a mental health issue with an individual, then the mobile support team will step in and the police will leave. Yeah.
We don't really have the piece solved of like where the mobile support team like takes people, because it's kind of like we don't have any like facilities really for people to run to. So we need like kind of the missing, they don't automatically go into like appropriate long-term care. It's kind of just like preventing them from getting into the criminal justice system, which is a good thing. But yeah. But it's like they don't necessarily get treatment.
Yeah, they don't get treatment. They don't, you know, they might detain them for a few hours and then they're released back to the community. And then they're called out again.
My husband got attacked in broad daylight by a guy who's completely naked and like totally high, like on Higgins. This was Sunday afternoon, and like, I mean, my husband's like a big, you know, like.
Was this recent?
This summer.
Okay,
And, like,
I think I remember hearing
officer,
this.
like saw it happen, and so like pulled up, and then they called the mobile support team, and what happened basically is that person just like got released back onto the street later. And it was good that there was no criminal charges, because like clearly he was like not in his right mind, but like it was like not a helpful thing at all in that, because he was just like back on the street.
It's horrible that that happened to your
10 minutes.
family.
Oh, that's okay.
We're not writing something down.
Tell us what decisions you made.
We haven't made a decision.
Well, you know, broad strokes, you've got a gap. Are you going to cut services or are you going to raise taxes? So here's a question I have about that. Got to figure that out first, and then any new requests. Throw them all up the window, or are you going to serve? Are you going to do them and then see which ones and raise taxes by what amount? Does that help?
Well, yeah, we understand it. It's just like this doesn't really tell us like how many.
What are we cutting?
So it's like hard to say what we could cut.
Yeah, so like how
knowing.
So this is, for example, I would be like, okay, we absolutely have to cut. I would be like, well, these are the departments. I'm going to tell those department heads they've got to cut X amount. Department head, as a city councilor, I'm not going to direct that. I would go to them.
A department with like 100 employees rather than like 4 employees, you know? So we don't even, I guess we can look at the budgets.
I mean, if you think about it, like fire, they're already very far along. Police, it's a fine line, because if we cut police, we've got police who are going to be working overtime. And that's when you get
gets really
tired
crazy and it
police,
goes OT.
bad things start happening. So where are you going to cut? So broad picture, okay, if you don't get it completed down to the last penny, that's okay, but how are you going to approach this? Okay, right?
Okay, I have a question about. Yeah. Well, I have a. So I'm confused about the mill levy. So, does that mean, is that here, basically? Because we're at 1.2 million, right? So does that mean this? Like, this is the most amount that we could possibly raise taxes by?
I would think so.
Like, do these speak to each other?
Yeah, because you can only go up by 1.2 million. So you would raise it by 8 mils.
So yeah, this is our cap. So what is?
Yeah. So I think the dollar number is it's easier to work in the dollar number and then just at the very end translate it.
So
we can't increase more than 1.2 million.
So if
That's
we
right.
went
And we're already
by
at
1.2 million, right?
760 plus these two.
We had a deficit of
That seems like absolutely impossible.
$760,000 that we had to make up, right? So if somebody did the math, let's say we didn't cut anything, and we decided to raise by 8 to get our maximum of 1.2, what's 760 minus 1.2 minus 760,000?
Right, that's where I was gonna come from too. I was like, let's raise to the max and then see what we can add in.
See, and I'm like, let's cut and figure out so we don't have to raise.
Can you help me figure out like what, if we were just to keep it the same and not take any of these requests, do we have to cut?
No, we have to
We would
raise
have to raise.
760,000.
Because right now,
Or
we're
cut.
already at
These deficits.
$760,000 deficit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So one or the other, yeah.
So we,
Because that's what these numbers.
so we would either have to cut and keep everything the same and say no to all of this, or we have to raise just to get this, and then we can still say no or say yes.
And so far, we've tentatively said yes to Meals on Meals and the Kevlar vests. So that's 240,000 plus 760,000.
And
We've
the-
already raised over $1 million.
Yeah.
So we're already like
So we were at 240,000 plus our.
Kevlar, yeah, is 220. The Meals on Meals is
So that makes us 9. Yeah, that's $1 million right there, huh?
Right?
Yeah.
Right, well, yeah, I was gonna say 440 is the number of excess once we cover the deficit.
Okay, yeah, that worked.
So
So this is like the new money that we can work with, and we've already now associated, or allocated 20,000 and 220,000.
Yeah, so that's like what we're raising so far.
Okay.
So that gives us 180,000 left if we raised it and didn't cut anything.
Yeah. Right. Which, I mean, assuming we want to do that, but I don't.
Right.
Probably not everybody wants that, I guess. Shoot. Okay. Well, I think the new fire station needs to be funded.
Yeah, the fire station is going to have to go to a levy. It's got to go.
That's going to get voted on.
Yeah. I think that IT services funding are on my list.
Well, mine
5-minute warning, guys.
too, but unless,
Don't feel like you're gonna like ruin the city or anything. It'll be okay. We have a lot to do.
Yeah, we're going to solve the city's problems tonight.
I mean,
I'm okay to not do that right now.
yeah. You know, I don't know.
I'm
The
a
IT business.
firm believer if you build it, they will come. So if we take it away,
They get a bus. It would be cheaper to get a bus or plane tickets, right? You know what I'm saying?
I understand where you're coming from.
And maybe that.
You're talking about IT or no? I think we're talking about different things.
We're being obnoxious. I'm being obnoxious.
I was like, wait, how is the bus going to help the IT problem?
My question for the IT is the department head really making people efficient and the whole works?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not an IT person, but
See, and my husband and I both are, and I would suspect that there could be a lot of things made more efficient in IT.
Yeah.
I don't think they are. That's just my gut.
We should probably cut that and bring in an efficiency.
and I'm coming from medical background in the hospital, and how much medical care costs went up when we got all the IT. Oh my God! Not only equipment, but just paying these people who probably made more than me a nurse. I don't know.
Right, like fix it all.
I do like the roads being all nice and fixed up.
Well, in that one, we don't have a cap with that. That doesn't have to go under the cap, but
Yeah, they have to go under
technically
their
have a
own
cap, but we can't,
department or something.
Just like
No, they have a cap, but we can't give that money to any other.
Any other
right,
department.
correct. But if we wanted to approve that, that doesn't go towards that 1.2.
Let's just make a broad sweep. Let's cut 100,000 from human resources. I bet you there's some time they're just sitting around doing nothing.
Cross
Right,
training.
like-
They need to cross train.
Yeah, well,
where is the DEI program? Is that came under fire this year for not being very useful.
The what program?
Is it the DEI? Just like the way it was like set up, there's like no tangible goals for it, and
The
there's like
drug enforcement?
no,
No, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Oh,
just from a policy perspective, it's problematic.
It's probably under developmental services.
It's not human resources because Heidi wanted to nix it because she was like, this is duplicating a lot of the work that human resources does.
Ah.
So we don't actually like need it. And then
I think it's work that they've been doing. They had a whole, the first session was on equity.
Yeah.
So I don't want, maybe it's under that department. I don't know, which would be
I should know that.
development services or housing.
I'm on the Jedi network, and they have a county and city person. But I don't know what department.
I feel like that work could continue even if there isn't like a separate little like department and like person. But I don't know where that's housed or
It's interesting what's happening with DEI work, just as a side note, because it was like, its perspective has changed a lot in the past 3 or 4 years.
Now people are calling it social inclusion instead of or that's like something they don't get to backlash to Same. It's crazy to me, but you know,
which like
marketing.
like my focus as a data scientist was like policy analysis. So it's just like policies like that are like there's no way to tell if they're working or not. You know, like the way it was set up was just sort of like it was very vague. Like
Well, then it sounds like you guys want to cut developmental services.
Well, development services is more about like building permits and
Oh.
Yeah. So that's like and I feel like that's a moneymaker for the city.
Right? Then how come it costs the city so much? It should be a moneymaker, right?
yeah.
Or is that the housing news?
Well, we don't have.
We're not seeing the revenue
Yeah, we don't
numbers.
have the revenue, so we don't know how much.
Or we're just assuming that everything is just balances perfectly.
And I forget what central services were, but they sound.
Yeah, I don't know what central services is. What is that?
And our accountants might be paid too much.
yeah, I feel like to really do this justice, we need more working.
Yeah.
More time.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Like,
And how is the city clerk not covered? I mean, do you think the city clerk would pay for itself? You know,
Like clerk and recorder.
like
I don't know what that
Well,
is.
because the city clerk does a lot of things like getting your birth certificates, which you have to pay for, and probably the court fees and other things like that.
They do a lot of support for the council.
Yeah.
So personnel on that would be the people in the
I think we could just generally say that we're going to have to make some personnel cuts, and we would request
all your stuff.
Yeah.
a better breakdown of
Right. No, they definitely, it's just,
personnel cuts to cover.
I don't know why they.
yeah, we need recommendations.
Yeah, there you go. They should pay for themselves. I mean, that department should pay for themselves.
Cut like 5% of the personnel budget across the board, except for like police and fire or something.
That's
Which might mean some departments don't have any cuts and others might have like a few.
Well, 5%, if we cut 5% from this budget, how much money do we get?
Well, I was
Just
just saying,
from the
they
personnel,
don't give us
so-
a total of personnel.
Yeah,
No.
we'd have to add it up.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a thought that like the city could hire like somebody to just do it with all personnel, but then that would cost money too. So
They did that, well, they did it for East Berkeley where they got the people that do the titles and all of that. They audited them and they redid their offices to make it a lot more efficient so that they didn't. Still, when you go in there, you're like, there's that person just sitting there, closed behind the computer. What are they doing? It's their job.
did they cut some positions?
I don't think they had any positions.
Well, we don't have a result.
So we decided, all right, you guys, you ready?
Okay. Thank you everyone for leaning in and working hard. This is
It is hard, it is very challenging. And this, like I said, is one of the easier budgets, comparatively speaking. So, you may or may not have come to a conclusion. I think what that conclusion is, if you did reach a conclusion, like what your decisions were. If you didn't, where did you get stuck? What couldn't you agree on? What were the hurdles? So I think we're going to have each table just report in, and we'll start over here. So what did you guys do?
Well, tell me your name. Sorry.
Eric.
Eric. Yeah, Eric came up with a great idea to go through this orange sheet and start off by prioritizing, like 1 through 5, how important we feel these are to the city.
Okay.
It's like 1 through
And what did you guys determine in terms of your new requests? Or will you go ahead? How do you
Well,
want to present it?
I'll let someone else take it from there.
I mean, we did not get through like associating it with this.
Yeah, we didn't get all that.
But we did, it was some of the things that seemed to rise to the top were the mobile support team, Kevlar vests, the Johnson Street shelter, and the Meals on Wheels. Those were like our top priorities. Other things sort of fell down, and then at some point we would have to reconcile this with what the rest of the budget was. We haven't gotten to that part, but we did decide early on that if there was going to be any kind of tax increase, it would be pretty minor.
Okay. Are you guys having your cake and eating it too?
We certainly are. We haven't gotten to the hard part.
We're deciding not to do the hard part on purpose.
From another.
I'm sorry.
And we're going to take some budget money from another department, but we also talked about, I don't know if this is possible, but cross-training the workers at the city cemetery to plow snow in the winter since they're not mowing the lawn.
That's a good idea.
And then, so you could save the FTE. I know, you're going to tell me, oh, but, I'm just thinking outside the box.
Hey, I think it's an era that necessitates it.
There might be some people in IT that could cross-train too, because Providence is very good at cross-training people, making you do other people's jobs, in addition to yours.
Okay.
I was just going to say, if we cross-train IT to plow snow, the IT people will work for us.
No, it was because someone who was in the funeral industry said that the people at the city cemetery were often looking bored during winter.
Well, I think it's probably more seasonal out there.
So you could
The other
two, Brian.
I mean, the other thing to think about is the city owns the city cemetery. It is our obligation and responsibility, and we can't really sell it to anyone.
No.
It's not a viable business. Like, it is what it is. We're going to have to do the best we can. There are cemeteries across America also that have been abandoned.
Yeah, no, we
And
were
that is
advocating for that.
Right. No, it's just, the other thing is the cemetery is a very small part of our budget. So that's, but anyway, okay, well, thank you. So you prioritized a few things. Wanted to keep so you're basically saying you will have to have a tax increase though for the deficit, and then the new requests that you were contemplating. Okay.
And probably some other cuts from staff.
It was hard to know.
Departments.
It was hard to know what to cut when, we don't know what all, what essential service, we don't know what all of those do. So it was hard to figure out where things were cuttable.
Okay. All right, we'll go on to, thank you for that. Great. Next table, what did you guys come up with?
Yeah, we also got stuck in the same part. We felt like some cuts were probably appropriate, but without knowing how many personnel there were in each department, kind of what they were doing, we didn't feel like we could do that in a very informed way. So we kind of also went about it sort of prioritizing the new requests, and we didn't even get through all of that, but the ones that were surfacing as the highest priority were police,
fire, Meals on Wheels. Is that
No.
right?
No, those were the ones that we were talking about.
We thought that we would take it to the voters for the new fire station,
Okay.
and that we would figure out a system for the people to, pay rent on the tennis courts. Okay, we wouldn't be funding those. But yeah, I think we tried to work backwards a little bit of looking at, the deficit and then what that, between our mill cap, how much money we have to work with.
I was really going for trying to cut something, but not knowing what some of these departments did, I was just like, well, let's just take a random 100,000 from them and we'll see if they can survive.
Yeah.
One thought too is that with personnel not really knowing the details, is that we could go to the different departments and say, hey, we really need to cut like 5% of the personnel budget, for instance. I don't know if that's accurate because we didn't get that far.
Yeah.
What can you make any recommendations? But leave police and fire as they are because they're needed.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. It's kind of some similar things. I will tell you, maybe Dale, or I don't know if anyone was around, if you would remember, I remember after the 2008 recession, like 2011 or 2012, there was a pause on all the collective bargaining agreements for a year. Do you remember what year that was? John Engen was mayor. You know what I'm talking about?
I think it was, I wasn't actually at the city,
Right.
but I think it was 2009.
Okay. So if you recall the 2008 recession, what the city did the next year, because it was just such a difficult time, the mayor agreed with all of the bargaining units, all of the unions, to take a hiatus and not have that cost of living increase that year, which is a testament to the mayor having good working relationships with those unions and the department heads and everyone kind of coming to the floor to address that situation. So I just think that's kind of a unique piece of Missoula history that people did that because they didn't legally have to do that. That is a step up. Okay, well, thank you. That is super helpful. Let's go to this table. What did you guys come up with?
Well, similar to the other tables, we prioritize the
New requests.
Mango, orange, whatever color that is. Yeah. And of course, I'm going to say yes to everything. We thought fire station, put it to the voters. We put a priority as well on fire, police, Meals on Wheels. We also felt like the shelter was a priority. We thought the tennis courts could wait, or we had questioned up the fees or usage. And we also recognize that IT is pretty important because there's been security breaches kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
And that would cost significantly more. And it's really not 80 grand if they're paying 40 grand in overage. It's really only 40 grand. And we also thought in public works, like maybe this year, because it has been kind of this, take a gamble on the weather pattern and just go with one person and one plow. You don't have to maybe go with two. But if we were to go with everything we're not allowed to change and we didn't know where to cut because of every other nuance that everyone already said, then we're almost 4.5 million above. And when you look at what that is, if you do that, it's about 30 mils, which comes out to times 1.3, comes out to whatever it is, per $100,000. So it's like $150, $160 on an average Missoula house per year. But can you explain to me what a mill levy cap, does that mean you're only allowed to be 1.2 million over?
For the general fund.
Right, so we were like, we were like 4 million over for the general fund. So we would have.
You can't do that.
So we can't do that. So we would have had to say no to plows, no to this, or know a lot about personnel to cut it.
And the issue of what to cut, that is a far more nuanced discussion with those department heads. Because they may be like, don't cut this from roads and give me 2 new snowplows.
Right,
So
what's
that's
the
on top of
person-
what
yeah,
I have.
yeah.
It very well could be like, no, this is a higher value than this.
Yeah.
So it's complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Anything else from this group? It sounds like people are kind of going in the same direction on some of this, so. Okay.
There's a ton of money.
We need to, I think what we decided was we needed to change some of the state legislatures.
Yeah.
We need to change some of the people.
That's true. Yes, and we're hoping Billy can help when she runs.
I think all of the legislatures should have to come in here and do this.
I agree.
Okay, let's go to this table back here.
Well, our very good-natured group added $640,000 worth of the new requests. We funded the IT, the police vehicle, Meals on Wheels, half of the vests, and $370,000 for the mobile support team, which comes to $640,000. So that's $1.2 million added to our $560,000 deficit. So we're going to do 8 mills for the general fund. And then for parks and roads, we're going to raise 2/3 mill for each of those, which comes to $100,000.
Okay, just bringing them up to the baseline. Okay, well, you guys, you know, it's very calm. Calmest group, they were finished early.
But they just raised it, man. They didn't consider it.
And before we go any further, I will just say there is a big backstory. We did have to do the Playfair Park tennis courts within the last 2 years. And suffice it to say, there were many discussions with the NCPS. It is hard getting money out of folks sometimes because they don't have money either. And we at least had a tool to use. And if those courts weren't up and running, there wouldn't be any AA tennis in Missoula or private school tennis, frankly. So it's a I could happily tell anybody the big backstory, but it's not for lack of trying to find other resources. Okay, let's go to this table here. What did you guys come up with?
Everyone can bring their own toilet paper to work.
I think we also kind of bogged down in the details of like defining things. But like a lot of the other ones, we started with the special requests and didn't really want to.
The Johnson Street and the Meals on Wheels were the only ones that we really agreed on because those were light things. But the rest of it, like, well, where do you come up with money for it? And without raising the taxes to it, right? And you can't. So it's either raise the taxes and defund some of it, or don't do these.
We had a lot of same questions about the personnel, like, okay, why is there 3.5 million personnel or just 1.5 million more people? What do they do? Who could we go without? Can we go without? Well, and you have the departmental presentation, so you probably have a sense of it. We get much more in-depth presentations, and we work with it here throughout the years. So we just kind of had a snapshot, but yeah, there's a lot to it. Okay, and so to close that gap, your structural deficit, you're going to raise taxes. We didn't get that far.
We had too many questions.
That's your job. As a city councilor, that is your job to ask questions, actually. So, okay, very good. All right, and our last table, what did you guys come up with?
So we started, with the deficits, and then we kind of went to the orange sheet as well. Started thinking about all the things that we wanted to add on to that deficit first, and then kind of work backwards and see where mills or increases would cover that. And that's the part we didn't quite finish. I think just the mill discussion is not vibing with the part.
Raise it 5.
I think 5 mills. I think we figured it out, but with like 80% confidence.
I'm 99% confident.
Which is something that, I would be really happy with. But as far as the sheet and the new items, we really appreciated the return on investment with the new IT person. I think anytime there's ROI with something that's a new request or something from city funding, that's like a big thumbs up in my book. So we agreed on that, as well as you don't want people working overtime, and there's an importance in IT. Also considered full for and similarly just value what they do. Half of the snow plows and employee figure at over time, you can see what kind of difference the one additional makes, but the infrastructure is like really important.
Okay.
And then we had a lot of conversation about the tennis courts. We ultimately decided on no, but I think that could really go back and forth with our group. But we did decide yes on the Johnson shelter, just knowing that I think it could use another year to see it work and see where there could be improvements or where we can sustain our funding. Just another year where we can be thinking around that, try to find better solutions. And then Meals on Wheels, we also talked a lot about. We actually decided that it would have a really good capacity for grant funding and other mechanisms of funding, and such as a smaller amount, 20,000 is super capable for grants. Maybe that's because we're thinking that kind of making cuts on them, but so ultimately, I think we'd be able to fund some new services and not cut too much and not use too many meals, but you're giving me a look like maybe my math.
I think you're trying to find that sweet spot. If you're gonna have to raise taxes, what's acceptable, what new requests are just so important. Yeah, it's a complicated, I mean, I don't know what you guys think. I think this is what we tussle with every year, is how to thread the needle. It's hard, but it's
So, yeah, I was thinking, so if there's no, there's a lot of pushback on the citizens about raising taxes, which would be understandable in this environment. At one point, I think we had a deficit of 996,000 that we're looking at, and that, I looked up the numbers, if my math is correct, that's about 1.5% of the total budget. I'm thinking, how hard would it be to go back to have each department see what they could do to, save 1.5%. Some of these budgets are, 20 million, they're in the millions, so that would be an alternative to raising, or, raise a little bit of taxes, but try to save money where we could. That's an idea.
I think these are the tools that we look at throughout the years. So yeah, thanks for articulating. Okay, any other comments on the budget? We try and make it as simple as possible, but capture the tensions that are inherent every year. And I think it's unsustainable in the long run. And my sense is at some point we're going to have some level of tax reform, because it's not a good trajectory you're on. I see that. Did somebody else have something back there? I did. Okay.
I have a question about the tax reform.
Yeah. State legislation. They accept the rules of the game. Yep. Yeah. So until they change our tax structure, we have to abide by these rules, and it's increasingly harder. I would just say every year it's increasingly harder and more and more needs.
It seems like it just passes on down, because you got the federal government that can have a debt, and then the states are not allowed to have a debt. We're trying to. So things should follow also that the city should not have to have debt, and that's a heavy requirement without some sort of funding.
I mean, we can have funded loans like buy a fire engine, that kind of thing. But yeah, we cannot run a deficit with our regular budget. That's not allowed by state law. Another question?
Quick question. Does the state have to approve a tourist tax, like what Whitefish has?
Yeah, so currently the local option sales tax is allowed by law in small communities that have high tourist. So that's
Phillipsburg,
Deer Lodge, Whitefish, West Yellowstone. There's a population cap, I think 15,000 something. So we don't fit into that category, so it is not an option. But so we look at the factors of our economy has changed, the state legislature has change the formula of what is paid into property taxes over the years in terms of changing equations on business equipment tax, centrally assessed, things like that. It's the burden shift they're talking about, the burden has shifted onto residential property taxes. So I don't think it's sustainable in the long run, but we will see what happens in the meantime. Here and then.
Where does the cannabis tax money go?
Dale still here? Dale left.
You know, I know some states, does any come local?
I mean, a small amount comes local, and I want to say it was like $380,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it went into the general fund with the idea that this would offset your taxes, and it did. $380,000, you know, you might have, that might be 10 cents.
So do you know what percentage that 380,000 was from, like, was that just for, that was obviously just for shops in Missoula County?
In Missoula, in the city.
In the city, yeah.
But then some of it went to the state too, right?
Yeah, there's a formula they collect, and then the cities have an option to add tax on.
The state takes 18%. Local jurisdictions could only go up to 3%, and it had to be voted on, and the population voted yes to tax that.
Where are they doing with that 18%?
Yeah.
Yeah, but to give you an idea, that 380,000 or whatever it is one of the very few non-property tax revenues that the city has. So, I mean, we're talking about less than 1%. And it's like when we talk about the tax system being on a path, something bad's gonna happen. It's because it's all piled up property tax. And the state legislature could even change, without doing anything like saying tourist tax or anything else, they could change the percentages because the tax burden has been shifted from commercial property to residential property in places like Missoula. Because they did adjust the tax rates for those two categories.
So, one more question, and I'm passing out just an evaluation form. And first of all, thank you everybody for doing this. And I so appreciate you taking the time to learn. It is really helpful if you're able to fill this out, however briefly.
So, and there's also an online form too that you can use, which is